Hi, I'm Madeline Lickteig, and this is my final capstone presentation for Nebraska Methodist College. So, my public issue that I chose to talk about was homelessness in Omaha. There were a couple of issues that I chose to talk about this. One is you can see homelessness wherever I go. Wherever I choose to do nursing, wherever I go in life, if I go to California, if I go to New York, if I go to India, you'll see homelessness everywhere. So it's always good to get a good foundation of homelessness because I know wherever I live, wherever I work, there will be homeless people there. And it's important to know how to interact and learn more research about it. And then for me, as a personal connection, this summer I led a trip with high schoolers and we went to Colorado in Denver and did a missions trip. And a lot of what we did there was we interacted with a lot of different homeless shelters in Denver, and the students really engaged and really had good times with it. And the whole time we were there, we kept thinking of like, it's really cool that you're engaging with it now, but like we can go back to Omaha and we can do this. Like there's still homeless people in Omaha. There's still people in Omaha who need help. And how can we take this mission trip that we did in the summer and turn it into a more regular thing that we can help more people in Omaha? So then I thought, when I saw homelessness on the list of things, I thought it'd be interesting to look at different things that we can do, and then maybe I can bring it back to the students and show them what I learned also. So, for my first effective communicator experience, during my second year at Methodist, I took a class where we studied Soren Kingard, and during his talks and lessons that we learned, he talked a lot about how you make thousands of decisions during your life, but it only matters truly how you respond to the decisions, not what decision you make. And I tend to spend a lot of my time very focused on, am I going to make the wrong decision and how will this affect me, and what if questions, and I get in my head so much that using his studies and learning from him, I was able to learn that it isn't as important of what decision I make, but how I respond to that and how I reflect that to others, and how I respond to others is more important than my decision that I make. And connecting that to the homeless population, it's important. Sometimes I think we forget that homeless people are still humans, like they still have decisions to make. Sometimes it only was a couple bad decisions that led them to the circumstances they're in, but they're still humans and they still have decisions to make. So it's important that I, as the nurse, can come and support them in their decisions that they're making, because that can help them have a better outcome and it can help me support them more. So for my second effective communicator response, I chose to talk about the COVID-19 pandemic and how it changed our communication with patients. We were wearing face masks. For a while as students, we weren't allowed in the hospitals, or we had social distancing when we were in classes. And I think it just showed me how much more goes on than just our verbal communication, how me using my hands right now, how me making eye contact right now, how the tone of my voice. And I had a patient when I was on the IV team clinic day that I went into the room. I was very bubbly with them. I made eye contact with them. I talked to him. I talked to his wife, and I was just very encouraging and nice with them. And he felt welcomed and he felt accepted and felt like I did a good job communicating, that he felt comfortable enough to let me try to put an IV on him. And if I would have went into the room and been negative or not made eye contact or been a very rude tone and just not communicated well with him, he wouldn't have felt comfortable in me to do the procedure. So I think that just showed how effective communication can be. That's just a simple little thing that I did, but it just showed me how body language and tone and eye contact is just so important, and it can affect so many more things than what we think about. And I think connecting this to homeless people, there's so many homeless people. I talked to a lot of them this summer, and even in Omaha, I go to different food banks and stuff and help out, and they just talk about how they don't always get eye contact. People try to avoid them so much because they don't want to interact with them. They just want to move on, and homeless people are really ignored. And I think it's important as a nurse and a healthcare person that we don't ignore them, and we sit with them, we talk with them, we make eye contact with them, we hold their hand, and we just help them during this time, because it can be very overwhelming. But if they have that person that's there that's kind and encouraging and makes eye contact with them and supports them and shows them that they truly care, it will be so much beneficial for both the nurse and the patient. So for my first reflective individual, I chose an experience of during my labor and delivery time at Methodist Women's. And I had this mom that we spent many hours together. We talked, we communicated together. She told me about her past with anxiety and depression, and she was kind of worried about the labor and everything that was going on. And as we progressed through the day, she ended up having some complications, and that made things worse. And then as she was going on and she was pushing, she was very fearful and very scared of how everything was going, but I was there and I was encouraging her and supporting her. And my nurse and I really just helped to support her during this time. And as I'm like looking back at it now, I didn't do anything crazy for her. Like I sat there and I held her hand, but it just shows how sometimes being there for a person can impact them so much more than doing more stuff for them. And like sometimes as a nursing student especially, like I don't think I make a big impact, but then I look at this and I see how if I wouldn't have been there, she would have been more alone and she wouldn't have had the support, and how my impact really is important as a nurse, as a new grad, as a student nurse right now. It just helps me to reflect on that and to just show that I'm doing important things right now, even if I don't always see it in the moment. And connecting this to homeless people is homeless people can have scary moments also. Everyone has times in their life when they're scary. When they're in the hospital, it's not great, and I can be there to support them and help them, just like I was able to support this wife or this mother and her husband and the baby. And it just shows like the homeless people that I interact with in the hospitals and in my everyday life, I can help to support them also, because everyone's going through a hard time. Yeah. So for my second reflective individual, this was this last semester. I went to Mosaic in Millard, which is a group home for developmentally delayed individuals. And I got to have this interaction with a patient who was nonverbal, but he had a computer screen in front of him where he had different words and phrases queued up and different animal games and pictures that he would play. And he asked me how to spell my, or like asked me how I was doing, asked me how to spell my name, had me spell out my whole name for him. And as he went on with the day, I went on, helped other patients, but I could just hear him in the background. He was playing with his farm animal game and just playing all the games, hitting the like chicken sound to the chicken picture. And he was just having the best time and was laughing and giddy and fun. And it just, as I reflect back on that day, I just remember how happy he was, even though he was put in a very bad situation and he couldn't communicate, but that he found a way to communicate now, and just how much happier he was. And just, it showed me that some days I really take advantage of the things that I have and the abilities that I have, and to just slow down and reflect on how fragile life is and how important it is to have fun, even on the days when it's hard and things are sad. But happiness really goes a long way. So then to reflect that back to homeless people, I think many homeless people also struggle with happiness sometimes and struggle with being happy. But then you also see a lot of homeless people who are very happy, even though they're put in very bad situations. And it just shows that everyone, even if you're in a bad situation, you can turn it around and make it happy. And as a nurse, I hope that I can help homeless people and different patients that I interact with turn the day from bad into okay, or into good, or into happiness, or at least put a smile on their face when I'm in the room with them. So for my change agent number 1, I talk about during my time at Methodist, I took an IAT race quiz, and it showed that I had racial bias towards African Americans, which was not super shocking. Like, I haven't had much experience with African American people. I went to a very white high school. I went to a very white church. Like, I just wasn't exposed to it very much. So it makes sense that I had that, even though I wish I didn't. And then I also had an experience that's very similar to that, where I had a patient that only spoke Spanish, and I just realized when I was helping her how little Spanish I knew. I took French in high school, so I didn't really know much at all, and it just showed how little I knew about the language and the culture. And I felt bad that I didn't know more, and I felt I didn't like that I didn't know about the cultures and didn't know more of the language and didn't know more, and potentially had this racial bias towards African Americans. And I knew I didn't like that, and I wanted to change for myself. So that's when I saw that I had something that was lacking, and I turned to books and I looked at different famous African Americans and Hispanic people and read up on the cultures, and I read up on books, and I read up on different articles, and I just tried to educate myself more within the Hispanic culture and the African American culture, just to expose myself to it more, so that the next time I do interact with an African American patient or Hispanic patient, I can be at a higher up knowledge and level to help interact them, because I saw that I wasn't, and I didn't like that. And this can relate to homeless people also, because homelessness doesn't discriminate on what races. It can affects people. So it's important that like I educate myself on everything, because the homeless people could also have different, they could be Hispanic or they could be African American, and knowing about their cultures also could help me with helping the homelessness. And then for my final change agent, this was my last semester when I was at Methodist. I chose an experience where I was with the nursing assistant that had one of my patients was just very rude and said very negative comments, and would just do very rude facial expressions when talking about my patient, and just was very condescending and rude. And I didn't like how she was treating my patient. My patient was an older woman, and she was just had no family around and was very needy. But even though she was needy, she didn't deserve the hate and the rudeness that was coming from the CNA. So I decided to talk to my nurse about this and just let them know. And then I also I saw that she was overworked and tired, because we all are right now, and it's hard to find jobs, and I get that, but that doesn't mean that the patient deserved less care than she deserves. So I decided I saw a change and I needed to do something about it, and I helped to take more work from the CNA so she didn't have to do as much, and just helped encourage her and support her, and know that I know it sucks right now to work as a healthcare worker, and it can be really hard and challenging, but we really shouldn't take it out on the patients, and it's not their fault if you're having a bad day. But I learned like it can be very scary to do that, and I know myself 4.5 years ago as a little baby nursing student, I never would have been able to have the courage to do that. But through all of my experiences and just seeing, I've been able to learn more, and just to know that it can be scary, but this shouldn't be the patient that suffers. And I saw that like when something is wrong, that I really truly do want to help make a change and to see things right. And then relating this to homelessness, there can be a lot of negative talk and misconceptions that are around homeless people, and not every homeless person is the same, but sometimes there can be big stereotyping that happens with them. So I think it's really important as a nurse that we keep an open mind towards patients who are homeless, and not put in these negative misconceptions about them before we even interact with them. And I think that can be a way to be a change agent towards homeless people as a nurse. And then just to conclude this all, I truly think that over my time at Methodist, I've grown to be such a stronger, educated citizen, and I've truly learned so much more about being a reflective individual, effective communicator, and a change agent. Like I talked about with change agent, I've done more things now than I would have when I was a freshman, but that's what happens. I write all these reflections, I learn, I grow, and I become a stronger student. I become a stronger nurse, and I realize the importance of all of these. Back in freshman year, I was like, why are we writing all these? These don't always make sense. But now looking back, I can see, and reading my old reflections, it just showed how much I've changed and how much I've grown and how much I learned because of it. So thank you for listening.